Greetings and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. Thank you to the elite members of the channel. It goes without saying that I deeply appreciate your support. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes. For once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Unnerving Law Enforcement Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. The air in the precinct always carried a faint metallic tang, like the aftertaste of blood, no matter how much they scrubbed the floors. 35 years I've breathed that air. Each day a little heavier, each case a little darker, until the weight of it all pressed against my skull, whispering truths I didn't want to hear. James Madison's words, "All men having power ought to be mistrusted," were etched into my mind from the start of my career. A grim mantra that grew louder with every passing year. I learned early that the badge doesn't just give you power. It invites a slow, creeping rot into your soul. One you don't notice until it's too late. As a police officer, you're supposed to stand above the filth you wade through. But sometimes the filth clings. Sometimes it becomes you. It was a humid September night in 2023 when the call came in. A domestic dispute. Routine enough to barely raise an eyebrow. The clock on the desk read 6:30 p.m., and I was already halfway out the door, my mind on a cold beer and the fleeting silence of home. But something about the report that landed on my desk the next morning made my stomach lurch. A sick twist that felt like a warning. Two of my officers, Warren and Frazier, had responded to the call. A man, Yura Yohan Rodriguez Rivera, 29 years old, had been found at the base of a gnarled oak tree in a quiet St. Louis neighborhood, bleeding out from a gunshot wound to his head. The details were sparse, clinical, but the words carried an undercurrent of wrongness, like a shadow moving just out of sight. I pulled up the body camera footage, my fingers hesitating over the keyboard as if they knew what I was about to see would change everything. The screen flickered to life, and there he was, Rodriguez Rivera, crumpled against the tree, his face a ruin of blood and bone, his breaths shallow and ragged, each one a desperate plea for time he didn't have. The camera's cold lens captured the scene in stark clarity. The man's eyes, wide with terror, darting as if for searching for salvation, in the faces of the men who stood over him, Warren and Frazier. Their voices cut through the footage, casual, almost bored. "We better take this motherfucker in," Warren said, his tone flat, like he was commenting on a spilled coffee. Frazier's reply was a low chuckle, chilling in its indifference. "We aren't taking anything. I get off in 30 minutes. Let's cruise around and come back." My heart stopped. I rewound the footage, certain I'd misheard. But there it was again, their laughter echoing as they turned their backs on a dying man. They walked away, their boots crunching on the gravel, leaving Rodriguez Rivera to bleed into the dirt. They got into their cruiser and drove off, the engine's hum fading into the night. I sat there, frozen, the room closing in all around me. The precinct's fluorescent lights buzzed like insects, and the air felt thick, suffocating. I watched the footage again, then again, each time hoping it would change, that I'd see some flicker of humanity in their actions. But there was nothing. Just the cold, deliberate abandonment of a man who needed them most. When they returned 10 minutes later, it was a grotesque pantomime. They moved through the scene as if seeing it for the first time, their voices loud with false urgency, their hands gesturing to an imaginary search. They knew exactly where Rodriguez Rivera lay, yet they played their parts with a sickening ease, like actors in a twisted play. Then the third officer arrived, his body camera offering a new perspective, one that made my blood run cold. He spotted Rodriguez Rivera immediately, his voice sharp as he radioed dispatch. Priority request, EMS, gunshot wound to the head, victim still breathing. He moved with purpose, checking for a pulse, searching for a weapon, while Warren and Frazier stood back, their faces unreadable. Other officers arrived, taping off the scene, one attempting first aid as Rodriguez Rivera's breaths grew fainter, his life slipping away in the flickering shadows of the oak tree. The third officer's camera caught Warren and Frazier slipping back to their cruiser, leaving the scene for a second time, their silhouettes swallowed by the darkness. The third officer's voice broke through the footage, raw with disgust. "You know what's messed up? Warren and Frazier just left." Later, he muttered to another officer, "I'm gonna out the hell out of them for this." His words were a lifeline, a reminder that not all of us had succumbed to the poison. But it wasn't enough to erase the image of Rodriguez Rivera, alone and abandoned, his final moments mocked by the men sworn to protect him. EMS arrived at 6:53 p.m., 27 minutes after Warren and Frazier first saw him. 27 minutes of agony, of blood pooling beneath that cursed tree, of a man's hope fading with every shallow breath. He was rushed to the hospital, but the surgeon's words haunted me. If he had gotten here sooner, we might have saved him. A single gunshot wound to the head had stolen Yura Yohan Rodriguez Rivera's life, but it was the neglect of two officers that sealed his fate. I watched the footage 5 times, each viewing a fresh wound. My hands shook, my stomach churned, and I felt an urge to smash the screen, to erase the evidence of what my own men had done. Warren and Frazier weren't monsters. At least they hadn't always been. Their records were clean, their psych profiles outdated but unremarkable. They'd been decent once, or so I thought. But something had changed. Something insidious had taken root, nurtured by years of exposure to the worst of humanity. The job doesn't just wear you down, it hollows you out, fills the empty spaces with apathy, cruelty, or worse. When the news broke, the city erupted. The press descended like vultures, and I couldn't blame them. They reached out to Rodriguez Rivera's mother in Puerto Rico, and her words cut deeper than any blade. "They lacked humanity," she said, her voice trembling across the miles. "I hope the full weight of the law falls on them." As a father, I felt her pain like a physical blow, imagining my own child left to die while those entrusted with their safety laughed and walked away. Our former chief didn't mince words, calling their behavior disgusting and predicting a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. He doubted criminal charges would stick, but his candor only fanned the flames of public outrage. Warren and Frazier were fired, their police licenses revoked for life, a punishment that felt both just and insufficient. They'd never wear a badge again in Missouri, but That didn't erase the stain they left on the department, on me. I kept asking myself how it happened, how two men who'd once taken an oath to serve could become so callous, so devoid of compassion. The answer lay in the shadows of the job itself, in the endless parade of violence, despair, and moral compasses that chip away at your soul until there's nothing left but a husk. What terrifies me most isn't that this happened, but that it could happen again. The department pours money into surveillance, into weapons, into armor. But what about the minds of the officers wielding them? We're sent into the darkness with nothing to shield us from the things we see, the things we do. Warren and Fraser didn't join the force to let a man die. They were broken by it, eroded by years of unaddressed trauma, a psych profile left to gather dust, of a system that demands everything but gives nothing back. I can't sign my name to this, not without risking my career. But silence is no longer an option. Madison's words echoed in my head, a reminder to mistrust those with power, especially ourselves. We need more than Kevlar vests and body cameras. We need Kevlar for the mind, a way to protect those who protect others from the poison that festers within. Yura Joan Rodriguez Rivera deserved better. His death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a betrayal, a sin that lingers in the air of this precinct, in the shadows of that oak tree, in the laughter of two men who forgot what it means to be human. I see his face every night when I close my eyes, bloodied and pleading, a ghost that won't let me rest. And I wonder how many others are out there, waiting for help that never comes, while the darkness creeps closer, claiming us all. That autumn evening in Ohio clings to me like damp rot. Its chill seeping into my bones no matter how many years pass. The air was sharp, the kind that bites at your knuckles and makes shadows stretch too long, too hungry. I was a young cop then, my badge still gleaming with the arrogance of inexperience. A rare night off had lured me into the false warmth of our home, a fragile bubble where my family, my wife, our son, our daughter Emily, could pretend the world was kind. We shared a meal, the clink of plates and soft laughter, a fleeting shield against the dark. But as the sun bled into the horizon, staining the sky a bruised orange, we drifted apart. My wife nestled beside me on the couch, the TV spitting gunfire and hollow laughter. Our son's baseball gear clattered in the kitchen, a familiar rhythm. Emily vanished into her bedroom, the door's soft click, a quiet promise of safety. I should have known better. Her scream ripped through the house, raw and jagged, like a blade tearing silk. My heart lurched, but I told myself it was nothing. Emily had a flair for the dramatic, screaming over spiders, misplaced socks, her own reflection in a dark window. But then it came again, a sound so primal it clawed at my spine. Not excitement, but terror, pure and desperate, begging for rescue. I sprinted down the hall, pulse hammering, and burst into her room. She was crumpled against the far wall, her face pale as bone, eyes wide and glassy, fixed on the window. Her trembling finger pointed into the void. Dad, there was a wolf, she stammered, her voice fraying at the edges. The blinds were yanked aside, exposing a gaping square of night. I'd always insisted the kids keep them shut after dark. Privacy, security, a father's futile attempt to keep the world at bay. Seeing them open now sent a prickle of dread down my neck. I stepped to the window, peering into the darkness. Nothing. Just an endless black, broken by the faint, sickly buzz of a street lamp. Trees swayed, their branches clawing the air like skeletal fingers. "Sweetie, what are you talking about?" I asked, forcing calm into my voice, though my gut twisted. Emily's eyes stayed locked on the glass, unblinking. "Wolf," she whispered, her breath hitching. "It was right there." Her words hung heavy, wrong, like a note played out of tune. I pulled her into a hug, her trembling body pressed against me. But her gaze never left the window. My wife and son hovered in the doorway, their faces pale, the house now suffocatingly silent. No TV hum, no kitchen clatter, just our heartbeats, loud and uneven, and the night pressing against the walls like a living thing. I scanned the room for answers. No forced entry, no scratches, no trace of anything. Just Emily's terror, so vivid it seemed to stain the air, and that open window, staring back like an unblinking eye. "Calm down, baby," I said, my voice steady despite the dread coiling in my chest. "Tell me exactly what happened." She pulled away, tears streaking her face, and whispered, "There was a wolf man outside my window." The words hit like a punch, absurd yet chilling. A wolf man? My mind scrambled for logic. A stray dog, maybe, caught in the lamplight, distorted by her imagination. The window was low, 4 feet off the ground. A big animal could have wandered by, startled her. But her eyes, wild and certain, told a different story. Something about her fear felt knowing, as if she'd seen something I couldn't. We tucked the kids into bed, though the house no longer felt like a sanctuary. My wife's eyes lingered on me, questioning, but she said nothing. I strapped on my service belt, flashlight, taser, handcuffs, gun, and stepped outside. The night was alive with whispers, branches creaking, leaves hissing across the lawn. I circled the house 3 times, my flashlight slicing through the dark, searching for tracks, fur, anything. Nothing. Not a footprint, not a snapped twig. Just silence, thick and watchful, like the world was holding its breath. I stood there, flashlight off, letting the darkness swallow me, waiting for something to stir. Nothing did. After 40 minutes, I went back inside, the unease settling into me like a sickness. The house stayed quiet after that, but Emily's scream lingered, a splinter under my skin. A week later, at the station, a report caught my eye. A woman, middle of the night, claiming a wolf had stared into her window. My blood slowed, a cold current running through me. It wasn't the same night as Emily's scare, but close. Too close. I asked around, probing for talks of wolves, strays, anything. Nothing. Just a coincidence, I told myself, but it gnawed at me, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Then, a week later, Rodney's voice crackled over the radio, low and urgent. "You ever close the door on that wolf stuff you're looking into?" My stomach twisted. "No, why? What'd you find?" His pause was too long, heavy with something unspoken. Got a guy pulled over on Concord and Mayfield. You should come and take a look. Might have found your wolf man. I sped to the intersection, the night closing in around me. Rodney stood by a battered sedan, a man cuffed and slumped on the curb. Dean Tomlin, average height, average build, mid-30s. But his skin was wrong, pale as bone, almost translucent under the streetlight. And his eyes, black, bottomless, like pits that swallowed light. Just looking at him made my skin crawl, like I was staring at something not quite human. Rodney filled me in, a call about a suspicious vehicle lurking in the neighborhood. By the time he arrived, Dean was slinking between houses, peering into windows. Rodney confronted him, and the guy got cagey, evasive, then clammed up, cuffed for safety. Rodney peeked into the car and saw it. A werewolf mask, gloves, a dark coat, half hidden in a plastic bag. The mask's matted fur and hollow eyes stared up, a grotesque mockery of what Emily had described. Rodney connected the dots, remembering my questions about wolves. It wasn't a coincidence. It was him. Dean Tomlin wasn't a thief. He was a predator, a peeping Tom who'd weaponized a werewolf costume to blend into the night, to become the monster at the window. The realization hit like nausea. Emily hadn't been imagining anything. She'd seen him, his face pressed to her window, those black eyes hidden behind a mask, watching her. My daughter, my home, violated by this thing that lurked just behind the glass. Rodney's eyes glinted with something dark. Figured you might want to rattle his cage. The air crackled with unspoken permission, a chance to make this creep feel the fear he'd inflicted. I didn't cross that line. I wasn't that kind of cop, but I wanted him to squirm. I sauntered over, my service belt heavy, my shadow looming. "Howdy, friend," I said, voice low, dripping with menace. "My partner thinks he made a mistake, wants me to deal with you." Dean's face twitched, hope flickering in those unnatural eyes. "No problem," he stammered. "I was just lost looking for a friend's house." I nodded, letting him think he was slipping the noose. "Happens all the time," I said. "Not like you were stealing or anything." He nodded eagerly, too eager. Then I leaned in, my voice a blade. "One thing, though. What's that werewolf costume in the back seat for?" His color drained, his body rigid, like a puppet with its strings cut. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his cuffed hands twitching. "What costume?" he croaked, the lie crumbling. "The one under your jacket," I said, slower now, letting each word sink in. "The one you wear with your mask. Were you on Minnow Street a week ago? Outside some little girl's window? My house." His eyes widened, panic seizing him. He stammered, tears welling, and choked out. "Yes." I wanted to tear him apart, to make him feel the terror he'd inflicted on my daughter, on who knows how many others. But I didn't. I let my stare, the threat of my presence, do the work. We took him downtown, booked him, His wolf sightings had piled up into a dusty, miscellaneous file at the station. Months, maybe years of reports dismissed. Our department stretched thin. They'd missed it. He went to jail. Not long enough. But probation kept him on a leash. I was there for his check-ins. My presence enough to make him sweat. His black eyes darting, never meeting mine. But the night stays with me. My shadow that never fades. Emily's scream echoes in my skull. I circle the house some nights, flashlight in hand, searching for something I can't name. The trees sway, the street lamp buzzes, but the silence feels different now. Watchful, waiting. Dean's locked away, but I can't shake the feeling that something else is out there, just beyond the light, wearing a mask that I cannot see. I've been a cop long enough to know the night hides things you'd rather not see. Shadows stretch too long. Sounds twist into something sinister, and sometimes the air itself feels like it's watching you. But nothing compares to that one shift in my first year on the Air Force. A night that sank its claws into me and never let go. It was a solo foot patrol through a grimy commercial strip where flickering streetlights barely held the darkness at bay. Drunks, petty thieves, and junkies were the usual suspects here. Small-time trouble I could handle with my eyes half closed. But that night, something else was out there. Something that made the world feel wrong. Like a photograph torn, just enough to notice. My partner had ducked out for a meal break, leaving me to cover the post alone for about an hour. I didn't think much of it at first. Routine patrols can grind you down, make you restless. So I decided to stretch my legs, heading south through the heart of the district. The route took me past a string of abandoned lots, their chain-link fences sagging like the bones of some forgotten beast. These were the kind of places where vagrants huddled in the shadows, where deals went down under the cover of night. I knew better than to wander through alone, but some reckless part of me, maybe arrogance, maybe stupidity, pushed me forward. After that night, I swore I'd never make that mistake again. The air was thick, heavy with a stillness that made my skin crawl. As I passed one of the lots, a flicker of movement caught my eye near the far fence. A shadow darting just out of reach, too quick to be human. I snapped my flashlight up, the beam slicing through the dark like a knife. But it found nothing, just the usual debris, crumpled beer cans, wrappers, and the faint, sour stink of decay. My eyes were playing tricks, I told myself. The low light, the late hour, it messes with your head. But the unease stayed, a cold weight settling in my gut, like I'd swallow something alive. I kept moving, my boots scuffing against the cracked pavement. The laneways were narrow, hemmed in by crumbling brick walls and rusted dumpsters that loomed like silent centennials. This was a high traffic spot for trouble, a coin toss whether you'd stumble on a fight or a deal gone sour. I stayed sharp, ears straining for any sound that didn't belong. That's when I heard it, a low, wet cough, like someone trying to clear a throat full of gravel. It came from behind me, too close. I whipped around, flashlight blazing, and caught two figures moving fast toward me, their shapes half swallowed by the dark. My heart kicked up a notch, but I kept my voice steady and professional. "Good evening," I said, the high beam pinning them in place. They nodded, barely glancing at me, their faces unreadable under their low caps. Their eyes were shadowed, empty, like windows to a house with no one home. They didn't seem fazed by the badge or the light, which was odd but not unheard of in a place like this. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. No need to escalate something that wasn't there. Still, I kept my distance, watching as they crossed the street and slipped into a narrow alley. They moved with a strange, deliberate purpose. Not hurried, but inevitable. Like they knew exactly where they were going. No words, no glances back. Just gone. I turned away, ready to shake off the encounter, when I heard the fence across the lot rattled. Hard. That unmistakable metallic clatter of chain link sent a jolt through me, sharp and cold, like a blade against my spine. I froze, my flashlight sweeping back to the lot. The beam trembled in my hand, betraying the steadiness I was trying to project. From the shadow, then those two men, and now this. The night was piling on, each moment heavier than the last, like it was building to something I couldn't see. I cursed myself for going so low. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1, especially when every time you turn your back, the dark spits out something new. I aimed the light at the fence again, and that's when I saw him. A man standing stock, still at the far end of the lot, staring straight ahead, not at me, through me, like I was a ghost he could see right past. He didn't look like the usual drifters who haunted these places. His clothes were too clean, too neat, like he'd stepped out of a different world and landed here by mistake. His face was pale, almost luminous in the flashlight's glow. And his eyes, they were wrong. Too still, too empty, like they held nothing but the dark itself. Something about him felt wrong, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong slot, jagged edges tearing at reality. "Hey, what are you doing back there?" I called out, my voice cutting through the silence. No response, just that blank, unblinking stare. I raised my voice, sharper now, the edge of my nerves creeping in. "Sir, you can't be in there. Come on out." Nothing. Not a twitch, not a blink. My pulse quickened, thudding in my ears like a drum. I radioed it in, keeping my voice calm, despite the knot tightening in my chest. "Post 4 to Central, show me 1 male stopped at 2300 block, back lot, no further, no emergency." I stepped closer, my boots crunching on the gravel, each sound too loud in the suffocating quiet. The man's gaze shifted, not to me, but above me, like something was hovering just over my head. I glanced up. Nothing but empty, starless sky, thick with the weight of the night. "Sir," I tried again, my voice tighter now, fraying at the edges. He finally spoke, his voice low and jagged, like broken glass scraping across stone. "Don't bring it over here." I stopped cold, my breath catching in my throat. "Bring what over here?" I scanned the lot, the beam of my flashlight slicing through the darkness, searching for anything, anyone. Nothing. No one. Just him, standing there, eyes locked on some invisible horror only he could see. My training kicked in. Mental episode. Maybe drugs, maybe something worse. People like this could be unpredictable, dangerous even. I kept my tone steady, calm, like I was talking down a spooked animal. "Sir, I just want to help. Let's get you somewhere safe." "Get the hell away from me," he screamed, his voice splitting the night like a crack in the earth. His eyes never met mine, still fixed on that empty space above me, wide with a terror I couldn't comprehend. "You're making it worse. Just go." I shook my head, trying to shake off the dread crawling up my spine like 1,000 tiny legs. I had to get him out of there, for his safety and for mine. I hopped a low fence, my boots hitting the dirt with a dull thud that echoed in my bones. He flinched as I climbed, his face twisting in panic, then went blank again, like someone had flipped a switch. His eyes were empty now, glassy, like a doll's, reflecting nothing but the dark. I checked my surroundings, keeping my light trained on him, and started closing the distance, each step heavier than the last. But when I looked up again, he was gone, vanished. No sound, no rustle of the fence, no footsteps fading into the night. Just gone. I stood there, heart hammering, my flashlight sweeping over the lot in frantic arcs. I checked behind the dumpster, the only cover in sight. Nothing. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. I'd taken my eyes off him, and he was gone. The air felt heavier now, pressing down on me like a physical weight, thick with something I couldn't name. I paced the lot, my being darting from corner to corner, searching for any sign of him. A footprint, a scrap of cloth, anything. Nothing. Central crackled over the radio, asking for a status update. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the mic, my mind scrambling for words that made sense. 1091, 98, non-crime corrected, resuming patrol. My voice sounded hollow, even to me, like it belonged to someone else. I didn't know what else to say. What could I say? That a man had screamed at nothing, then dissolved into the night like a shadow? I turned back to the street, my legs moving on autopilot. But the night felt different now. The shadows seemed to shift when I wasn't looking, curling at the edges of my vision. The silence was too loud, too alive, like it was breathing down my neck. I finished my route early, too rattled to keep patrolling alone. I needed light, noise, people, anything to drown out the creeping dread that clung to me like damp rot. I headed to the 24-hour Mexican joint where my partner was grabbing his meal, a grimy little place with buzzing fluorescents and the smell of grease hanging in the air. I just wanted a soda, some chips, something to ground me, to remind me the world was still solid. But as I stepped inside, the world tilted and my blood ran cold. There he was, the man from the lot, standing by the soda machine, talking to my partner like they were old friends. Same face, same build, but his clothes were different. Cleaner, pressed, like he'd stepped out of a catalog instead of a filthy back lot. His skin was too smooth, his movements too precise, like every gesture was calculated. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat, my mind screaming that this wasn't possible. He glanced over my partner's shoulder, his eyes locking onto mine. A slow, knowing smile curling his lips, and he winked. Not a friendly gesture, but a challenge, a secret shared between us, cold and sharp as a blade. Then he said goodbye to my partner, brushed past me, his shoulder grazing mine with a chill that sank into my bones, and slipped out the door. I turned to follow, to demand answers, to grab him and shake him until he explained what the hell he was. But he was gone. Again, the street outside was empty, the night swallowing him whole, like it was in on the game. My partner waved me over, oblivious, filling his cup with soda, the ice clinking like bones. "You know that guy?" I asked, my voice barely steady, fraying at the edges. "Nope, just some random dude. Why?" Just, curious," I muttered, my mind reeling, my stomach twisting into knots. We left it at that, but I couldn't shake it. That man wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a hallucination. He was something else, something that knew me, watched me, played with me, something that could slip through the cracks of the world and step back out, wearing a new face, a new skin, but always with those same empty eyes. I never told anyone about that night, not even my partner. Some things you bury deep, lock away in the darkest corners of your mind, but they don't stay buried. They claw their way back, whispering in the dark, waiting for you to turn your back again. Each shadow I pass on patrol now feels like it's watching, waiting. Every rattle of a fence, every flicker in the corner of my eye. It's him, or something like him, lurking just out of reach. I don't believe in ghosts or demons or skinwalkers, not really. But I believe in what I saw, and I know deep in my bones that whatever he was, he's still out there, waiting in the dark, pretending he doesn't know where he is. The night was heavy, the kind of dark that clings to your bones and makes you question every shadow. It was a DPS officer, stationed in a sleepy suburb, where the days bled into one another, each as monotonous as the last. Traffic stops, seatbelt citations, the occasional DUI. Those were my nights, a slow grind of routine that lulled me into a false sense of security. I told myself it was a stepping stone, a quiet post before something bigger. But deep down, I feared this was it. The safe hours, the predictable calls, they wrapped around me like a shroud, and I let them. Until that night. That night when the ordinary unraveled into something sinister. Something that still claws at the edges of my mind, refusing to be buried. Every officer has a story. One moment that brands itself into your soul. A shootout, a brush with the paranormal, or some uncanny encounter that defies explanation. Mine has haunted me for years. A shadow I can't shake, no matter how many therapists I've spilled it to. No matter how many times I've tried to dissect it. To find a rational thread to tie it up and tuck it away. It lingers like mold, murky and oppressive, a reminder that some things don't add up. Some things don't want to. It was a weekday night, the streets settling into their usual hush, broken only by the low hum of tires on asphalt. I was just coming on shift, the cruiser's engine still ticking as it cooled. The radio crackled, pulling me from my thoughts. Disturbance reported at Hawthorne Juvenile Facility. Medical requested. Officers on scene to investigate. The words hit like a cold wind. Hawthorne. Even the name twisted something in my gut. A primal unease I couldn't shake. It wasn't just the place's reputation, though it had one, whispered among officers like a ghost story. It was the feel of it, the way the air seemed to thicken the moment you crossed its threshold, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Hawthorne wasn't overtly sinister, not in the way you'd expect it. It was a juvenile detention center, high security, all locked doors and blinking keypads. Most calls there were routine, fights between kids, medical transports, administrative nonsense. But every officer who'd been there knew the truth. Behind those heavy doors, something wasn't right. The air was wrong, heavy with a stifling energy that made your skin prickle like you were being watched by something just out of sight. We delivered kids there often, and every trip felt like stepping into a place that didn't want you. A creep fest, Jake called it. He wasn't wrong. I met Jake in the parking lot, his silhouette leaning against his cruiser, the orange glow of his cigarette flaring briefly in the dark. "Hawthorne again, huh?" he muttered, flicking ash onto the asphalt. The way he said it carried weight like the name itself was a curse. "What's it this time? Another kid throwing a tantrum? Stabbing a nurse?" "Disturbance," I said, grabbing my flashlight from the passenger seat. "Medical's not here yet, so let's find out. You know they won't go in before we do." Jake snorted, grinding his cigarette under his boot. Cowards. He wasn't wrong. The medics never entered Hawthorne without us clearing the way first. Something about the place made even the toughest paramedics hesitate. The facility's front doors loomed before us, locked tight, the keypad blinking red like a warning. Jake pressed the intercom, and a muffled voice answered, sharp and tense. "Hawthorne Juvenile, who's calling?" "DPS," Jake said, flashing his badge at the tiny camera above the keypad. "You called us." A long pause stretched out, the silence buzzing with something unspoken. Then a heavy clunk as the doors unlocked. We stepped inside, and the air hit me like a physical thing. Cold, thick, pressing against my skin. The reception area was dimly lit, the overhead lights flickering faintly, as if they were struggling to stay alive. 2 night shift workers stood behind the glass of the office, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. The younger one, a woman in her 20s with dark circles under her eyes, waved us in, her hands trembling. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's really bad." Jake and I exchanged a look. Bad wasn't a word they threw around lightly here. "Define bad," Jake said, his tone sharp. He'd never hidden his hatred for this place. The way it seemed to pulse with something wrong. The older worker, a man in his 40s, clutching a clipboard like a lifeline, stepped forward. "There's been an assault," he said, his voice low, almost reluctant. "One of the boys. We checked the cameras, but we didn't see anyone enter the building." I frowned, the hairs on my neck standing on end. "No one? How's that possible?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," the woman said, her eyes darting to the shadows behind the glass. "You'll want to see the footage." Before we could press for more, the intercom buzzed again. Medical had arrived. The workers let them in, and we moved as a group, deeper into the facility. The halls were suffocatingly quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every sound. Your breath, your footsteps, the faint hum of the security cameras tracking our every move. The walls were painted a sickly pale green, the color of decay, and the air smelled faintly of disinfectant. undercut by something sour, something alive. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, but it only made the shadows sharper, more defined, like they were waiting for us to turn our backs. The medics weren't here to investigate. They wanted the patient. So did we. They led us to the victim's room, the door ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling out. Inside, the EMTs were already crouched over the boy. He was young. Couldn't have been older than 16, but his face was a ruin, swollen and battered, blood crusted around his nose and mouth. His eyes were half open, unfocused, staring at nothing. His chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths, each one a struggle. Whoever did this wasn't human, not in the way that matters. The brutality was monstrous, the kind of violence that leaves a mark on everyone who sees it. I couldn't imagine what kind of rage, what kind of thing could do this to a kid. They found him like this, the woman said, her voice shaking. In his room, hasn't said a word. Jake crouched beside the boy, his jaw tight. This wasn't self-inflicted, he said, his voice low, almost a growl. Somebody wanted this kid dead. The woman nodded, hugging herself. We found a pipe in the room. It wasn't there before. Has he said anything? I asked, my eyes still on the boy's broken face. She shook her head. He's barely conscious. The EMTs worked quickly, their movements efficient but tense, their eyes darting to the corners of the room as if expecting something to lunge out of the dark. I couldn't blame them. The air in that room felt wrong, like it was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a mistake. Let's see the footage, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The workers led us to a cramped office, walls lined with monitors and stacks of files that seemed to absorb the light. The elder man sat at the desk, his fingers trembling as he clicked through the security feed. This is where it gets weird, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're going to want to take this with a grain of salt. Just show us, Jake said, crossing his arms, his eyes hard. The man pulled up a series of clips, starting with the exterior of the building. It was as secure as they claimed. Doors locked, no windows breached, no sign of forced entry. Then, he switched to the interior halls. For several minutes, the footage showed nothing but empty corridors, the occasional flicker of a light casting jagged shadows. Then, a figure appeared. It was a boy, his features indistinct in the grainy video, his movements quick and erratic. He slipped in and out of the camera's view, never staying long enough for a clear shot. There was something wrong about the way he moved, jerky, unnatural, like a puppet jerked by unseen strings. My skin crawled watching him, a primal insect screaming like this wasn't right, wasn't human. He avoided the cameras with precision, as if he knew exactly where they were. His head tilting at odd angles, his limbs twisting in ways that made my stomach turn. Who's that? I asked, leaning over, my voice tight. No idea, the man said, his eyes fixed on the screen. None of the boys here match his description, and look, he's avoiding the cameras, like he knows they're there. The final clip showed the boy approaching the victim's door. He paused, his head tilting as if listening to something we couldn't hear. Then he produced a tool from his pocket, a pipe, maybe, or something sharper, and jimmied the lock. He slipped inside, and the footage ended. No exit, no trace. That's it, the man said, sitting back, his face pale. We've reviewed every angle. There's no sign of him entering or leaving the building. What about the victim? Jake asked, his voice hard. What's he in here for? The woman hesitated, her eyes flickering to the floor. He killed a boy about 6 months ago. Brutal attack. Stabbed him to death. We're still waiting to hear if he'll be transferred to a more permanent facility. A knot twisted in my stomach. This place felt like a prison for the damned, a purgatory where the walls themselves seemed to whisper madness. The workers printed the clearest image they could manage, a blurry shot of the boy in the hallway. His face was pale, his eyes dark hollows, his expression unreadable, like a mask carved from bone. It wasn't a face you forgot. It was a face that followed you into your dreams. We returned to the victim's room, where the EMTs were preparing to transport him. I crouched beside the boy, holding up the photo. You recognize him? I asked, my voice soft but firm. His reaction was immediate. His face went rigid, his breath quickening, his eyes wide with something beyond fear, something primal, something that knew death. He turned his head away, curling into himself, his body trembling. He wouldn't look at the photo again. He wouldn't look at us. He knows him, Jake said quietly, his voice heavy with certainty. Whoever he is, he knows him. The boy didn't speak, didn't move, didn't acknowledge us. It was as if the photo had stolen something from him, some last shred of safety. We searched the facility from top to bottom, every room, every corner, every vent and lock. We checked the windows, the doors, the cameras. Nothing. No sign of forced entry, no evidence of an intruder. It was as if the boy in the footage had materialized from the shadows and dissolved back into them. The worst part? There was no footage of him leaving the room. Not a single frame. The room had no windows, no other exits. He was just gone. Jake, ever the skeptic, shook his head as we left, the night air cold against our skin. Ghost, he muttered, half joking, half serious. Has to be. Don't start with that, I said, but his words burrowed into me, sharp and persistent. How else could someone bypass that security? How else could they vanish without a trace? It didn't make sense. None of it did. In the end, no one was found. No one was charged. The facility tightened its protocols, installed better cameras. But it felt like locking the door after the wolf was already inside. The boy recovered, physically at least, and was transferred to another facility. I never saw him again. The figure in the footage remained a phantom, a question without any answer, a shadow that lingers in the corners of my mind. Years later, I still can't shake it. I lie awake at night, replaying that footage in my head. The jerky movements, the hollow eyes, the way he seemed to know the cameras were watching. I tell myself it was one of the other boys, someone who knew the facility's layout, knew how to pick locks and dodge cameras. It's the only rational explanation. But rationality feels like a thin veneer, a lie I tell myself to keep the dark at bay. Because deep down, I know we missed something that night. Something important. Something dangerous. Something that wasn't human. Not entirely. And I can't help but feel it's still out there. Waiting, watching, biding its time. The city of Denver had a pulse, but it was a sick one, arrhythmic and faltering, like a heart choking on its own blood. I never meant to be a cop. The army spit me out, raw and restless, and I just needed something to anchor me. Something with a paycheck and a promise of stability. I thought I'd do a couple of years, save up, maybe go back to school or tinker with trucks in a quiet garage somewhere. But Denver doesn't let you go. It's a city that sinks its claws in deep, drags you back into its grime and chews you up until you're nothing but bone and regret. 1 year bled into 2, then 5. And before I knew it, I'd been stalking its streets for over a decade, a ghost in a uniform, haunting the metro's underbelly. It was the mid-2010s, and the city was unraveling. The air was thick with wildfire haze, a sickly orange glow that clung to everything like a shroud. Needles littered park sandboxes, glinting like cursed treasures under the sun. Alleys reeked of piss and something darker. Rage, maybe, or despair. Tent cities sprouted like sores behind every fast food joint, and the people were fraying, their eyes wild and twitchy, looking for someone to bleed their anger onto. Usually, that was us. Me and Fitz, my partner. We had a rhythm. He was a mountain of a man, slow-moving but sharp as a blade, his mind cutting through the chaos like a surgeon. I was faster, better with words, talking down drunks and psychos before they could swing. Together, we patched each other's weaknesses. A two-man war machine grinding through the paperwork and the madness. Most nights we patrolled 5 Points or Lodo, where liquor stores and subway stations festered with trouble. We'd break up fights outside the 7-Eleven on Blake Street, dodged bottles and wrestled knives from trembling hands. But some nights didn't fit the script. They burrowed into you, sharp and cold, like a splinter you couldn't dig out. That night, the one I can't shake, started like a photograph burned into my skull. The sky bleeding orange, sirens screaming in the distance before our shift even began. Fitz was sipping gas station coffee, its bitter steam curling in the cruiser's stale air. I was flipping through unpaid parking tickets, fighting the weight of my eyelids. We just handled a noise complaint near Alameda, some drunk yelling at shadows, when the radio crackled, sharp and urgent. 207 in progress, robbery, multiple suspects, corner of Vine and 18th, units respond. Fitz's eyes met mine, a silent agreement. We tossed our cups to the floorboard, flipped on the lights and peeled out. My gut churned. Please, just be a drunk with a knife, I thought. Some idiot stealing jerky. But Denver had a way of laughing at your prayers. What we rolled into wasn't a robbery. It was a slaughterhouse. The laundromat was gutted, its glass shattered into jagged teeth. The mini-mart next door looked like it had been turned inside out. Shelves toppled, blood streaking the floor. One clerk clutched a head wound, blood seeping through his fingers like oil. Another was screaming into a phone, voice raw and ragged. In the corner of it all stood 2 masked men, one gripping a crowbar like a scepter, the other clutching a butcher's knife with a lover's care. Their eyes glinted, wild, unhinged, like animals caught in a trap. Fitz grabbed his radio. I drew my sidearm, the weight of it cold and heavy in my hand. "Denver PD," I barked, voice slicing through the chaos. "Drop the weapons. Get on the ground now." My heart was a jackhammer, pounding against my ribs. But my grip was steady. The crowbar guy locked eyes with me, his stance wide, unyielding. The knife guy flicked his gaze to the alley behind them, and I saw it. The calculation. Fight or flight. They don't freeze. Not the ones like this. They run, or they kill. "Do it now!" Fitz roared, his sidearm leveled like a promise of death. Knife guy broke first. He spun and bolted for the alley, shoes slapping pavement like gunfire. Fitz charged the crowbar guy, tackling him into a snack rack with a crash of metal and glass. I didn't think. I ran. My boots pounded the asphalt, lungs burning in the acrid wildfire haze. The alley was a narrow throat, walled in by rusted chain link and layered with game tags. The air thick with the stench of piss and decay. He was fast. Too fast. But I was gaining. 20 feet, 15, 10. He glanced back, eyes wide with panic, and pushed harder. We rounded one corner, then another, dodging trash bins and a filthy torn mattress. "Stop!" I shouted, hand tight on my pistol. But he didn't look back. Then he darted between two buildings, a gap so tight it felt like the city itself was closing in. I followed reckless, driven by adrenaline and something darker, something that whispered I couldn't let him go. That's when the night turned on me. I cleared the gap and skidded to a stop. Not one, 3. The guy I'd chased stood panting, flanked by 2 others, all masked, their silhouettes jagged against the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. One held a baseball bat, its wood chipped and stained. The other gripped an iron pipe, its end glinting with menace. Panic flashed in their postures, but it didn't matter. I raised my sidearm, opened my mouth to shout. Too slow. The pipe came down like a guillotine, slamming into my firearm. Pain exploded, white, hot, and electric. My gun clattering into the shadows. I staggered, instincts from old bar fights kicking in. I raised my arms to block, but the bad guy was already moving. The wood drove into my ribs and something cracked, a sound I felt more than heard. I dropped to my knees, gasping, the world tilting. They didn't speak. That's what clawed at me, what made my skin crawl. Not a word, just grunts, the dull thud of impact, the wet crack of bone giving way. A boot slammed into my stomach, another into my thigh. I curled up, arms shielding my head, waiting for the shot. My own gun turned on me, a bullet to the face, while they laughed over my corpse. But the shot never came. They vanished into the dark, leaving me crumpled like roadkill, blood soaking my uniform. My left arm, a useless slab of meat. My ribs screamed with every shallow breath. I rolled onto my side, staring up at the sliver of sky between the rooftops, empty except for that sickly orange haze. A siren wailed, distant, indifferent. Footsteps crunched closer, and I forced myself to sit up, blinking through blood and tears. Fitz rounded the corner, another officer at his back, guns drawn, sweeping the shadows. "They went that way," I croaked, pointing with my good arm. "One's got my gun." Fitz crouched beside me, his face a mask of horror and cold fury. "You're gonna be okay, man. The EMT's coming." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. Something haunted flickered there. Something that knew the city was a beast, and we were its prey. Then it came. A gunshot, sharp and close, maybe a quarter mile away. One crack, then 2 more. The air froze. The other officer radioed it in, voice tight with dread. Fitz stood, ready to run again, but paused to grip my shoulder. "Stay down," he said, then vanished into the dark. I lay there, shaking, every nerve screaming, bile rising in my throat. Sirens multiplied, overlapping like a chorus of the damned, cars tearing through the streets, boots pounding like war drums. The district was waking, a hornet's nest kicked by my blood. The EMT arrived, a kid with eyes too wide for this nightmare. He cursed under his breath as he checked my vitals, wrapping gauze around my arm like it could hold my soul together. "Ribs are fucked," I muttered, teeth chattering. "Arm's gone to hell." He nodded, mumbling something I couldn't hear over the sirens echoing in my skull. The radio crackled again. "Officer-involved shooting, Vine and 20th, one suspect down." I closed my eyes, the words sinking like stones. More shouting now, cops sweeping the alley, their boots thundering past. I was nothing, just a bloodied husk, the city spinning around me like a vulture circling carrion. Fitz came back, blood on a sleeve that wasn't his. His jaw was set, eyes burning with something I couldn't name. He knelt beside me. "He fired your gun at us," he said, voice low, like confessing a sin. "Got one round off. Missed." I put him down. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anything. Just a hollow, icy void in my chest, like something vital had been carved out. The crew rounded up the others. 2 more arrests, weapons recovered, charges piling up like bodies. They were a local gang, flexing their claws on corner stores, claiming turf they'd never hold. They didn't expect us to chase them into hell. Weeks later, the doctors patched me up. Ribs taped, arms set, a bag of painkillers, and a slip saying, "Fit for duty." I stared at that paper for 2 days, then tore it to pieces. I never went back. I turned in my badge, my uniform, my soul. The city didn't care. Months later, another cop got jumped 2 blocks from where I fell. He didn't walk away. His name barely made the papers. Just another sacrifice to Denver's hunger. People ask if I miss it. The adrenaline, the purpose. I miss knowing who I was, but not the weight of it. Not the metallic taste of panic when a shadow twitches wrong. Not the gunshots that might be a friend's last breath. That night didn't just end a shift. It ended me. My badge sits in a drawer, cold as a gravestone. Sometimes I hold it, trying to remember why I carried it. But all I see is that alley, those masks, the silence of their violence. And all I hear is the city, laughing in the dark. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true, unnerving law enforcement stories. Before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the rest of the membership of BackToAshes. Thank you all so much for your continuous support. As I always say, without you, I wouldn't have a voice and this channel would not exist. I appreciate you more than words can say. If you are new to the channel and you've enjoyed what you've heard, please leave a like and a comment. And if you would like to join the BackToAshes family, please subscribe and set your notification bell to all. That way you will know every time I've uploaded a video. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you are awake, I hope you've enjoyed these stories. In the meantime, please stay vigilant and safe out there. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.